Susan, what are you doing?
As we came back from shopping, what we saw was a moving truck stopped in front of our house, along with my in-laws. Glancing at me in surprise, my mother-in-law then continued giving directions to the movers. Please, don't just barge into our house on your own accord.
Don't you get sassy with me, young lady. Hurry up and open the door.
Saying this, my father-in-law reached for my purse. In a panic, I clutched my bag and stepped back. Seeing me like this, my mother-in-law continued with a sinister laugh.
Strangers, please leave right now.
Dumbfounded by my mother-in-law's words, I was left speechless. However, Tom, having heard all of this, changed his complexion and began to tremble violently.
Do you not know who you're talking to, Mom? What are you talking about?
I thought that this was the right time to tell the truth. With that thought, I decided to reveal the truth to my enraged mother-in-law. My name is Christy Grubb. I'm 48 years old, and I run an insurance agency. I took over the business from my father. I'm someone who likes to have everything neatly organized, and this job, where I can introduce insurance that suits our clients' needs, suits me perfectly. Since my father's time, we have continued to have good relationships with old acquaintances, and thankfully, business has been booming. I met my husband, Tom, when I was 30, at a work event. A client, a longtime friend of my father, introduced us, suggesting we grab a coffee sometime. Tom was 2 years older than me, a very calm and refined man. Apparently, he had just broken up with a long-term girlfriend who had cheated on him. We hit it off after just a little conversation, and soon after, we started exchanging contact information. It didn't take long for us to start going out together. At that time, my mother wasn't in good health, and I wanted to fulfill her wish to see me in a wedding dress, so I was actively seeking a marriage partner. I think I was in a bit of a rush to get married. On the other hand, Tom wasn't as keen on getting married. Nevertheless, he respected my feelings and, half a year after we met, he proposed to me. I happily accepted, crying and saying, "Please take care of me." After that, things moved quickly. We visited each other's parents and had a small family-only wedding ceremony. My mother looked so happy as she saw me in my wedding dress, and she peacefully passed away the following month. It was thanks to Tom that I could fulfill my mother's last wish. I decided to cherish Tom, who had stayed by my side and held my hand even at my mother's funeral, for the rest of my life. Even after 5 years of marriage, Tom and I hadn't been able to have children. Both of us believed that children are a gift from heaven, so we didn't feel rushed, but my in-laws were the ones who brought it up. It happened when we went to greet them for New Year's. Tom was reluctant to go, but we ended up going because my mother-in-law contacted me directly and asked if we were coming.
No child yet? When are you going to give me a grandchild? Mom! We've told you, we're leaving it up to nature. If you're going to talk like that, we're leaving. I understand that, but maybe the field is barren. That's rude to Christy. Christy, I'm sorry. Let's go.
Right at the doorstep, suddenly brought up the topic of grandchildren. We left my in-laws' house even before we could exchange New Year's greetings. I was the one who had convinced Tom to go. And yet, as soon as we got back to the car, Tom apologized to me. "I'm really sorry for making you feel uncomfortable. I'm totally fine. I'm sorry for making you feel bad, Tom."
It's fine for me. They are my parents, after all. But now, my family is Christy. If anyone, even my parents, hurts Christy, I'm ready to cut ties with them.
But
it's okay. We never really saw eye to eye from the beginning. Even without the issues about Christy, we grew distant as adults.
Tom said, with a look of loneliness evident on his face. All I could do was reply with a quiet yeah. Since then, Tom made it a point to distance me from his in-laws and even moved to a new place. They tried reaching out multiple times asking for our address, but Tom ignored all their calls. For the next 13 years or so, I had little to no contact with my in-laws except during family events like weddings or funerals. By the time we hit our 40s, they stopped bringing up the topic of grandchildren, which was a slight relief. However, one day, out of the blue, they found our place and paid us a surprise visit. It so happened that Tom was out with a friend that day. Knowing I was alone, Mike and Susan, my in-laws, barged into our home, nosily rummaging through our stuff.
Goodness! You two still share the same bed at your age? How scandalous! Christy, with these kind of undergarments, don't you think Tom won't be excited?
Ignoring my disgusted expression at their rude remarks, they continued to snoop around our home, making snide comments every now and then.
This is probably why you guys don't have any grandkids for us. Now, dear, there's still hope. Look!
Susan exclaimed, shoving a crumpled newspaper article into my hands. The article was about a woman who gave birth at 60. Realizing their implication, I felt chills down my spine.
We've been too lenient on you. Even at your age, you can still have kids, right? You might as well move in with us. I'm home. Do we have guests?
In the midst of Susan's rant, my dad arrived. Little did they know, Tom and I had been living with my father since we moved. Tom really cared for my dad, and my dad treated Tom just like his own son. Seeing my dad, they looked shocked.
You're having Tom support your own father too? Normally, one would first show gratitude to their husband's parents.
I was at a loss for words, not knowing how to respond to Mike and Susan's entitled behavior.
We're always grateful for your kindness. I really didn't expect to see Christy's father here. Isn't it a blow to your pride, relying on my son? Well, you know.
My dad replied with a vague smile. It seemed they didn't like his response as they looked visibly irritated.
Mom, Dad. How did you even find this place?
Tom, who returned earlier due to his friend not feeling well, stormed in with a furious expression. Seeing Tom's anger, Susan replied nonchalantly.
You never told us, so we hired a detective. It was pretty pricey. You'll pay for it, right? No way in hell I'm gonna pay for that.
As Tom said that, he stomped over to Susan, grabbed her by the clothes. Then, forcing her to stand up, he dragged her out of the room against her will.
Hey! That hurts! What are you doing? Tom! You're hurting your mother. Stop it right now.
Susan let out a piercing scream, followed by a loud shout from Mike echoing through the room. However, Tom didn't care and continued to drag Susan all the way to the entrance, then pushed her out of the house.
Don't ever come back here. I'm even considering cutting ties with you guys. Oh my. Is this Christy's doing? What kind of wife have you married? It has nothing to do with Christy. I've made up my mind. Get lost.
Though Susan still tried to protest, once Tom threatened to call the police, they reluctantly left. After confirming it, Tom apologized to me and my father. I'm really sorry. I can't believe they went as far as hiring a detective to search for us. They've been incredibly rude. No, Tom, it's not your fault. But
I know very well that you're a good kid. Come on, let's eat together.
Thank you. Tom, with tears in his eyes, thanked my father repeatedly. And that night, the three of us had a pleasant dinner together. After discussing it, we decided not to move and to call the police if they showed up again. Surprisingly, we thought my in-laws would come back the next day, but weeks passed without seeing their faces, and we thought we could continue our quiet life. A month after my father passed away, Tom and I went on a bit of a trip to buy some memorabilia of my father. On the way back, I couldn't help but scream out.
What are you doing, Susan?
What we saw on our way back from shopping were movers and my in-laws in front of our house. Susan glanced at me, surprised, and then continued to give instructions to the movers.
Don't just enter the house without permission, please. Don't talk back to me, young lady. Just open the door.
Mike reached out for my bag as he said this. Panicking, I hugged my bag tightly and stepped back. Susan, with a sinister smile, continued speaking.
Outsiders should leave immediately.
I was so stunned by her words that I couldn't respond. However, Tom, who had heard all this, was trembling with anger, his face turning red.
Do you not know who you're talking to, Mom? What are you talking about?
This seemed like the right moment to tell them the truth. Feeling this way, I decided to tell my mother-in-law, who was screaming in a fury, the truth. This is my house, you know?
What are you talking about? You made Tom buy this house, right? How shameless can you be?
My mother-in-law, Susan, stared at me with a confused and accusatory look. When I looked at Tom, he sighed deeply and began to speak.
This is genuinely Christy's house. I'm just living here with her permission. Tom, is Christy blackmailing you? Poor thing. You don't have to tell such obvious lies. Besides, Christy is a housewife, right? What?
Tom's eyebrows shot up in response to Susan's words. He was probably angry that she implied I was the kind of woman who would manipulate and hurt Tom by holding something over him, but the main reason was probably because she called me a housewife.
What do you mean Christy is a housewife? Christy runs an insurance agency, you know? What are you talking about? She's always at home. And yet, she goes out to spas and whatnot. Just the other day, she was dining at a fancy restaurant with some unknown man. Disgusting.
The unknown man Susan was talking about must have been my client. I was invited to a hotel lunch recently by someone who used to be a client of my father's, to talk about old times. Tom was also invited, but he had work that day, so in the end it was just the two of us. Of course, it was also a business meeting to discuss new insurance policies, so it wasn't purely private, and Tom had agreed to it. If she had hired a detective, she should know that I went straight home alone right after lunch. Despite this, she came to a conclusion, which probably meant she really wanted to break Tom and me up.
That person is an acquaintance of mine, and first and foremost, a client of Christie's. I just couldn't go that day because I had work, but we do dine together occasionally. Tom! You're being deceived! It's not too late. You can marry a younger woman and have grandchildren. I would hate to marry anyone other than Christy, and besides, I can't have kids with anyone else anyway. What? What do you mean?
At Tom's shout, not just Susan, but also my father-in-law, Mike, looked dumbfounded. And I was also frozen in place, not understanding the situation. Neither Tom nor I had undergone fertility tests. That was because Tom said that if one of us was found to have an issue, we would end up blaming ourselves, so we decided against it. A few years ago, when I had a high fever, the doctor recommended that I get tested. So I secretly went and got checked out, and it turns out, I was born infertile. But I thought that if I told you, Christy, you might leave me.
Just because you can't have kids doesn't mean I would ever leave you.
Yeah, I know, but I couldn't help feeling insecure. At Tom's words, I instinctively hugged him. And Tom hugged me back. I was filled with the resolve to cherish Tom forever.
What do you mean you can't have kids? You were a defective product all along. Is this a joke? Have you been deceiving us all this time?
My in-laws, Susan and Mike, seemed to have completely forgotten about me and started berating Tom. Tom looked back at them with cold eyes.
I've told you guys time and time again that I'm not your toy. To call your own son a defective product, that's not something parents should do. What's wrong with calling a defective product a defective product?
Susan was enraged by Tom's words and grabbed him by the chest with both hands, approaching him threateningly. Then, Tom whispered a man's name softly. Hearing that name, Susan's face turned pale and she backed away from Tom.
Who is that? Who knows?
With a confused look on his face, Mike and a suddenly flustered Susan listened as Tom calmly answered.
That's the name of my biological father. What are you talking about? Your father is me, isn't it? I didn't know until recently either. Remember when you guys hired a detective to follow me? Well, I hired one too. And I found out a lot of interesting things.
Saying this, Tom showed the screen of his smartphone to Mike. Susan's face was as white as a sheet. And then, looking at the screen of the smartphone, Mike's face turned bright red as he began to tremble.
Were you cheating on me? Does that mean this guy is Tom's father, and you've been cheating for 50 years? That's not it. What do you mean that's not it? You dare deny it when you were hugging each other.
Ignoring my in-laws, who started bickering loudly, Tom and I asked the moving company to relocate our stuff to a storage unit nearby. We were told there would be an extra charge, but since my in-laws would be paying and they started this whole mess in the first place, it only seemed fair to make them shoulder the burden.
So, I've been raising another man's son, huh? I'm horrified at the thought of spending money on a defective product who isn't even related to me by blood. Tom, you better take responsibility and support me. Got it? Huh? No way. What? You have an obligation to support me.
My father-in-law then lunged at Tom. But Tom easily pulled away, flashing a smile.
The only one who needs to take responsibility is Mom. I was just born, that's all. Besides, you guys didn't even pay for my high school and college expenses. I've been living on my own since high school. How can you say that? While I was desperately earning tuition money, unable to hang out with friends, you were stealing my part-time job money. What more do you expect me to say to such a father?
That's when I finally understood why Tom particularly disliked his father. However, his father simply acted as if it was all justified.
A child's money is the parent's money. And so is the child's spouse's money. But we're not related by blood. On paper only. If you really want to cut ties, then return all the money we spent on you. I already did. I've been sending money back every month. Huh? Sending money?
I knew that Tom had been sending money to his parents' house. He even sent more than what they asked for, just to keep them from getting involved with us. However, his father seemed genuinely unaware of the money.
See, I've been transferring money every month. $1,500 every month. Hey, what's going on? I get it. Mom has been using all my money for herself and her lover. What?
Susan could only fidget. As her husband approached her and slapped her across the face. Initially shocked, she soon glared at him and screeched.
How dare you? You should be grateful that a man with no money or status could marry me. He's a man with both money and status. Staying married to you was just convenient for enjoying life with him. I even let you raise his child, didn't I? Be thankful. Are you kidding me? You said you were pregnant, so I married you, even though your father beat me up. So what? It would have been pitiful if he got beaten up.
The father-in-law was speechless at Susan's sudden and drastic change in attitude. Just then, Susan's smartphone began ringing loudly. She checked it, her face lighting up as she answered in a sweet, coquettish voice.
Hello? Darling, what's up? Missed me?
I shuddered at hearing Susan's voice for the first time. Tom, standing beside me, had a twisted expression. Though he was smiling. I would soon come to understand the meaning behind that smile.
Wait, you're not darling? Ma'am? What? Oh, no, this is a mistake, or rather, all of it. Alimony? $10 million? Wait, please hold on a moment.
Susan was frantically speaking into the phone, but it seemed like she was forcefully cut off and left in a daze. Tom started chuckling.
All the evidence photos and recordings must have reached them. What? This is your fault. It's called sharing information. Oh, and by the way, she has no intention of divorcing your boyfriend. He's a son-in-law in her family, after all. Tough times ahead for you. A son-in-law? You didn't even know that? Well, it seems like he's keeping a number of mistresses. He was told by his wife to only cheat with younger women, right? He must be getting an earful right about now. Mistresses! But he said he loved only me.
Stunned by these shocking truths, Susan slumped to the ground. Mike looked down at her with satisfaction, then suddenly turned to Tom with a thought.
It must have been tough having such a mother. All right, I'll let bygones be bygones this time. Let's live together, just the three of us. Cut ties with your mother and it'll be you, me, and Christy. Christy, I'll wash your back for you. Stay away from Christy.
Unfazed by Tom's words, Mike approached me. As soon as his hand landed on my shoulder, I grabbed it and threw him to the ground.
Oof! What the?
Surprised and confused, Mike didn't understand what had just happened. I looked down at him with a cold gaze. In fact, I had been attending self-defense classes since I was young. Though my job in insurance involved dealing with companies, there were still good and bad encounters depending on the client. I started learning self-defense so I could escape if I ever found myself in a dubious situation, as it was one of the conditions my father set for me to take over the company. Gradually, I started enjoying the classes and kept attending them even after taking over the business. I wondered if I had gone too far with a 75-year-old man like Mike, but seeing Tom looking satisfied as he looked down at his father, I felt a bit relieved. Mike seemed too shocked to speak, but then Susan, my mother-in-law, started talking to me.
Christy, that was impressive. I'm sure you can handle anything. How about this? Why don't you pay the alimony to that woman for me? If we live together, we could save on living expenses, and I can help with the household chores. And about kids, we could always adopt. I'd take good care of them. Are you kidding me? There's no way I'm letting a woman like you into my precious house filled with memories of me, Tom, and my father. And why should I be the one to pay the alimony? You should pay it yourself.
It seemed I had thrown away any semblance of politeness along with Mike, as I found myself saying everything I had been thinking directly to Susan. She was taken aback at first, having never been spoken to like that before, but her face quickly turned red as she started yelling again.
How dare you talk to your husband's mother like that? I've already told the neighbors we'd be moving in, and besides, that house is already being demolished. That's right. I don't have a house to live in anymore. So forget about her, let me stay. What are you saying? I'm his mother, he should be living with me.
Mike, responding to Susan's words, stood up from the ground and shouted back, while Susan argued fervently.
Amidst their quarrel, Tom calmly and seriously communicated our intentions. Neither of you will be living with us. We've decided to cut ties completely. If you continue to make a scene here, we will call the police. The police!
At the mention of the police, my in-laws' faces went pale, and they backed away. Then, still arguing, they disappeared towards the train station. Later on, Mike and Susan got a divorce. However, since neither of them had any money, they ended up living together again. Mike tried to claim alimony from Susan and her lover, but it was offset by a claim from the lover's wife. Susan, having never worked long hours in her life, found it difficult to hold down a job. She would quit at the slightest inconvenience, and she was already struggling with daily expenses. Mike was in a similar situation, and they were just barely getting by with their combined incomes. The lover, on the other hand, was squeezed dry. He lost his rights as the next company president and is now confined to his house. His wife couldn't easily forgive a 50-year affair, and I heard she intends to take him for all he's worth. I thought Tom would be down after such an incident, but surprisingly, he seems to have gotten over it quickly and is doing well. Apparently, the lover's family approached him, suggesting that since he shares blood with the lover, he could become their heir. However, Tom, not a fan of competition and not particularly greedy, simply said, "That's too much for me to handle," and went to sign the paperwork to renounce the inheritance. While I feel a bit disappointed, it's so like Tom, and I'm happy about it. As for me, a business associate recently asked me if I wanted to adopt a cat they had found, and I'm currently excitedly looking up cat towers. I've already decided on a name, Marine. It's a tribute to the frequent fishing trips my father and Tom used to go on, and the cat's eyes are as blue as the sea. Even Tom seems to be in high spirits, eagerly anticipating the arrival of our new family member. The doorbell rang, signaling the arrival of my business associate. Well, time to meet our new family member. Excitedly, I opened the door and greeted them, "Welcome."